Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Michelle. Good morning, Carrie. Thank you all for all your support on this. We can get started. I'm just getting an updated briefing with Councilor Sabi George's letter. So let me just grab that. And thanks, Ellie. So I see we have Councilor Mejia, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Arroyo. Are we all set to go, say in 1 minute?
I'm ready to go when you are, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Carrie. So let's see, Councilor Mejia, Flaherty, Arroyo, Flynn, Sabi George. Okay. Just pulling up the latest briefing here. All right. All right, I'm going to get started. Everyone, let me just I'm trying to just adjust my screen. It's a little funky. Okay, perfect. And thank you, Councilor Sabi George. We got your letter as well, and thank you for being on. All right, Michelle, Carrie, thank you. Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Andrea Campbell, and I am the District 4 City Councilor. I am also the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. I am joined by colleagues, and I will say them in their order. Councilor Mejia, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Flynn, and Councilor Sabi George. And we did receive a letter from Councilor Baker as well, because I don't think he can attend. And Councilor O'Malley, unfortunately, is sick today. So I will stay in contact with him on all things that we discussed today as well. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meeting in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this working session virtually via Zoom. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health accommodations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate alternative means. The public, of course, can watch this hearing via live stream at boston.gov/citycounciltv or on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, FiOS 964. It's also being recorded. Today's working session is on docket number 0967. It's an order regarding the Civilian Review Board nominations. It was sponsored by myself, along with City Council President Matt O'Malley, pursuant to the City Council's obligations under the City of Boston Code Ordinances, Section 12-17.8, which established the Civilian Review Board within the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency in the City of Boston. And just as way of background, on August 18th, 2021, the City Council opened to the public an applications portal which ran through September 20th, 2021. This allowed folks to apply and submit information via an application process to be considered for the Civilian Review Board. The City Council received 81 eligible applications, and of course, want to thank everyone who applied and went through this process. The councilors were asked to submit to this committee in advance or at this session up to 3 names for consideration. And we ask that each council, of course, review all of those applications in detail. The goal of this working session is to discuss the councilors' recommendations so that the council can forward 9 total nominations to the mayor, of course, Mayor Wu. And just a quick refresher, the Civilian Review Board consists of 9 total members. 6 members are appointed by the mayor from a pool of applicants recommended by civil rights advocates, youth organizations, neighborhood associations, and members of the Boston community with knowledge of law enforcement. The remaining 3 members are appointed by the mayor from a pool of 9 nominees, which will be submitted by the Boston City Council and via the Boston City Council president. Under the ordinance, board members must be Boston residents, not be current members of law enforcement, and have at least 1 member between the ages of 18 and 21. Board members each shall serve a term of 3 years. However, initial appointees will serve staggered terms of 1, 2, and 3 years, and board members shall not serve more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms. Each member will be paid $100 per hour for their service, not to exceed $50,000 a year. There are several responsibilities of the board, and I won't go through all of them. This is in the legislation, but it includes conducting independent inquiries and investigations where necessary into complaints made against the Boston Police Department, resolving complaints or matters not within the scope or review of the Internal Affairs Oversight Panel, at the board's discretion, reviewing and investigating and making recommendations with regard to allegations of disparate treatment by BPD in recruiting, hiring, promotion, discipline, termination of members of BPD, periodically evaluating alternative options and/or improvements to the civil service examination process, making recommendations to the police commissioner regarding reviewed complaints or other matters before the board, and convening all board members at least once per quarter, but more often at the discretion of the board. All of this is laid out in detail in the legislation that was passed by the council, working in partnership with the previous mayor and the previous mayor's task force. And I want to thank the task force in particular for their work as well in getting us to this point. And of course, look forward to staying engaged with them as OPAT continues to be formed and implemented. And I also want to acknowledge, not only did we receive a letter from Councilor Baker, we also received one from Councilor Edwards, and I will read those into the record since they are unable to join us. Let me just make sure I am pulling them up. And then I will go counselor by counselor to have you talk through some of your recommendations and go from there. Let me just pull up Councilor Baker's letter, which is in my briefing. Councilor Baker, dear Chair Campbell, I am writing to submit my names of preferred applicants for the Civilian Review Board. I would like to recommend the following 3 names: Benjamin Thompson, Robert Lundbaum, Mona Connolly Casper. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. And we're going to be keeping track of these names. And Michelle, thank you for sort of tracking these to see where there's alignment, of course, with the counselors. We know that there possibly will be, which is of course great, which makes it a lot easier to narrow it down to 9 folks. Councilor Edwards also submitted a letter. Dear Chair Campbell, I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend tomorrow or today's hearing for docket number 0967 regarding the Civilian Review Board nominations. Per your request as chair, I hereby recommend the nomination to the Civilian Review Board, Luis Lopez and Eugenia Perez, which is just 2 folks, but she included also in her letter recommendations of these folks with their qualifications. Luis is age 20. He would qualify as a youth delegate to represent the voices and lived experiences of young people. Mr. Lopez, a lifelong East Boston resident, BPS graduate, and Northeastern College student, exemplifies the American dream. His commitment and dedication to the city of Boston and his desire to give back to a city that has given him so much is exactly the kind of dedicated youth that the CRB should include. Eugenia is a longtime Boston resident who has resided in Dorchester, Roxbury, and now lives in East Boston, has a lived experience of nearly all parts of the city. She would be a fair and impartial board member that would thoughtfully and impartially evaluate all cases in an unbiased manner. I give my full recommendation for nomination of the aforementioned individuals to the Civilian Review Board. Sincerely, Lydia Edwards, Boston City Councilor, District 1. I won't read Councilor Sabi George's letter because you are on here. So I'll just wait to get to you so you can talk through your letter and your recommendation. I don't think I've missed anything. I just have to remind the public, it's a working session, so it allows counselors to work through these things in a public way. We do not take public testimony at working sessions. We know that folks have emailed their various thoughts, which they can continue to do so to the city council. But at this point, I am going to go through each counselor so they can talk through their recommendations and their names. And I would ask that you state the names clearly so we can write them down and take all this information down as well. The first person I'm going to in order of their arrival is Councilor Mejia. And I want to thank you, of course, and Councilor Arroyo for your leadership and work on the passage of OPAT in this ordinance as well. So Councilor Mejia, I'll turn it over to you. And I think I just lost you. Are you still here? Okay, I think I'm going to move on because I've lost Councilor Mejia for a second. But Councilor Flaherty, I'll go to you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My questions are more, I just had some questions on process in terms of,
Okay.
I know that I don't think we necessarily required resumes, but I'd be interested just to see if whether or not any of the applicants have references and or whether or not they've disclosed any affiliations, just for purposes really of transparency, just to make sure that, we're hiring, is, obviously objective, and it's a big piece of this. I think make sure that folks are objective and so have no predispositions either way coming forward. And I think that either a resume or through references and or disclosure of groups and organizations that folks are affiliated with is important to the discussion. And then obviously then the deeper dive. And then will the list of candidates be kind of like what we do with the community preservation, where we get a list of candidates and then we do a round, and then we will eventually do interviews? Will this committee interview sort of the finalist, if you will, before we make final selections?
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for the question. We did ask folks to submit various documentation, resumes, and you will see that each applicant submitted relevant information. We did not go into the deep dive of affiliations with certain organizations. The only thing that was really paid attention to is the law enforcement connection, because of the way in which it was structured, the mayor's office and the mayor's appointees will intentionally include some folks with a law enforcement background. The council side was supposed to really look at those who had more of a community background versus law enforcement. And so I will just say that that's that. And so we asked folks to go through each of those 81 applications. You will see that some are stronger than others. Some submitted more robust information. And I think those tended to be the stronger applicants. And so I'm curious, of course, to see the 3 names that each counselor comes up with. And then the other thing is the difference between this and the CPA is that the mayor obviously ultimately makes the appointment from the 9. And so there will not be interviews. We are going through literally this paper process. We are going through what we received and having as much of a robust conversation before Councilor O'Malley submits those to the mayor. We wanted to design this in such a way where we allowed folks in the public to apply versus just asking for random names. So hence the application process, but also to allow this conversation here, each counselor to review those applications in detail and submit who they think are the strongest applicants out of the pool that we received. And we got 81. I'm confident that we can find 9 solid candidates out of the 81 to submit to the mayor for further deliberation. Obviously, the mayor herself can go through some additional steps on her end before making her final 3 appointments from the 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair, because that was one of the questions. We have 81, and then there were several that was just sort of name and address and like
That's
maybe
right.
1 or 2 sentences, and it's just so hard to kind of get I guess a clear sense and understanding when you just have a name and 1 or 2 sentences. So I'm glad you cleared that up. So there was the folks that sort of had maybe taken a little bit more seriously and put forth either resumes and or references, and others just kind of penned a name and an address. So, and whether or not they were aware of what the process was or not, that just okay. So I'm going to just sort of do a little deeper dive during this hearing on the 81, and then towards the tail end I'll be able to submit some recommendations. So appreciate it, man.
Great, thank you. And if for some reason, Councilor Flaherty, you can't stay on, we ask folks to submit a letter just like others have who were unable to attend because of previous conflicts.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I see Councilor Mejia is back. We lost you for a minute.
Sorry,
Councilor Mejia, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell, and really excited to be here. You know, I have my three names. I'm just going to start off with who I'm going to go really hard for. All three of them are highly qualified and I think would bring really great perspective. But I'm going to be leading with Carrie Mays for the youth delegate spot. You know, for those who don't know Carrie Mays, she's a young woman here in the city of Boston, has been engaged in a lot of community in engagement efforts. She is a graduate of Fenway High School, has been working at teen empowerment since she was 14 years old. And so when we think about creating space for young people, especially young people who in her role at working at teen empowerment, a lot of the work that they did was really developing relationships between police officers and young people and really creating those community dialogues to happen. I think that she brings a very fresh perspective and a balanced approach to really bringing people together across their differences. And so just everything about Carrie is one of the reasons why I'm so incredibly happy to put forth her name as one of the youth delegates for this opportunity. Then I'd like to also present Anna Hernandez, who is a Boston resident. Obviously, they all have to be, but she's a social worker and works in the Boston Public Schools. And I feel like someone like Anna, who is able to have a level of understanding around the mental health and wellness issues and really bringing that insight to her thinking is something that is worth considering when we think about the body as a whole. And bringing that lens into these conversations. And then the last person that I'd like to present is Kelly McGrath. She is as civilian as can be, someone who's deeply rooted in her community. And I believe while we may not always agree on politics, I do believe that she is someone who you can work with collaboratively. And so those are the three recommendations that I'd like to put forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and we're taking lots of notes. Appreciate that. I'm going to go on to, I'll skip Councilor Flaherty since I just went to you, and next I'll go to Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your work on this and getting us to this day. Excited about this. So my nominations, and I'll just jump right into it. Zachary Lown, who is an attorney in Rosendale, somebody who I actually know professionally from my time at CPCS, Community Public Health Services. He worked at the Roxbury Defenders, was very thorough, was very good in his work, but also as a counselor, he is now a constituent and is somebody who has done a lot of convening of neighbors, has done a lot of work, isn't on multiple boards, somebody who I think would be a good person for this. I also have Maria Dolorico, who is a mental health specialist, somebody who does, she's a South End resident, somebody who does a lot of work in the community over there. Is very well known, very well regarded in mental health spaces. And I think that is a wonderful addition to this. And then after that, I am another person down for Carrie Mays as the youth nominee. I think Julia did a great job talking about her qualifications, so I'll leave it there. And then I'm happy to participate. Is this really just we all say the names and we leave? Like, what is the plan?
Essentially, a little bit. And of course, creating space for counselors to ask questions, almost like Councilor Flaherty did. I'm hoping that we can see some alignment. Councilor Malley was sick today, so he has to go through this too. And so I got to check in with some counselors who unfortunately had conflicts, or I think he just got sick from getting a shot. So, but this is helpful. And so you can stay on or stay off. And I'm confident.
But thank you.
Perfect. And thank you for joining. Very helpful. Now let's see, order Councilor Flynn. And I just want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilor Braden. Oh, you're muted, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell, and thank you for your leadership on this important issue. I guess similar to the comments of Councilor Flaherty, I'm going to submit a letter. I'm going to review the names more closely, but I'm going to submit a letter and make some recommendations. Council Campbell, is there a deadline for us to submit a letter by?
ASAP.
Okay.
Well, I will
Okay.
say if you could get it to us by early next week, we really want to get these over to the mayor as soon as possible because we'd like to at least somewhat finalize the process before the legislative session comes to an end. So there's some time if you could get it to us next week.
Okay.
And I know there were a lot of applications to review. I want to be mindful of that. And I think it's important that we do that. I didn't realize, we would get so many, which is great. And so sometime next week would be great. I'm checking in. I'll check in with, I don't know, Ellie or Michelle, if you guys had a hard date in mind with Councilor O'Malley's office as well. Is it sort of before the next council meeting? What were we thinking?
Michelle, I'll send that question to you because I imagine we'd want to have the final names in a committee report for the next council meeting.
I think that we can defer a bit to your discretion as chair, and you and Councilor O'Malley can make a final decision on that.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful, that's helpful, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Ellie. I think what would be helpful, Councilor Flynn, is by the end of next week. Obviously, it's the Thanksgiving holiday, because we also want to make sure that we have adequate time to review all the names. And this process alone will allow us to narrow down names. We can then go back to those applications, do some follow-up if there's outstanding questions, and then get to a final list and committee report by the next council meeting. So if you could get it to us by the end of next week, and I'll say the same for Councilor Flaherty, who I think was trying to maybe rush to do something today, that would be great.
Oh, okay. And I guess one other question and a comment. So, Councilor Campbell, I know you mentioned it. I didn't hear the entire answer, but are all the resumes there, or just part of them? I know you talked about it, so I apologize if I didn't get it correctly.
Yeah, some some have resumes, some do not, and we wanted to have a process, frankly, that was as accessible and inclusive as possible. Some folks may not even know how to really put a resume together, but still submitted some relevant information. But I think if you see something that is helpful, you can obviously follow up with us, and we can figure out how we get more information from candidates. But there were some that went above and beyond, and I think that's just a strong statement of someone who actually put in the work to submit a very robust application. I think really speaks to their desire not just to serve, but to make sure that we were fully aware of their various qualifications. And so we wanted to not be too stringent. We wanted to open up the process in a fair way. And I think we got a lot of great applications and a lot of great folks to choose from.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. And my final comment is I saw one name that I looked at briefly, Mona Conley Casper.
Okay.
Is someone I would highly recommend for her excellent background in community involvement, community service, engagement with residents in various neighborhoods across the city, in South Boston and Dorchester, particularly. Very active in youth sports and after-school programs as well. So, but I will put all that in writing. So thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell.
Very helpful. Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just read the names. I did come up with 5 names, and I know that
you're going to have to limit that to 3 names. I had 19. We had 19. So you can read 5, but we're probably going to circle back and really push the 3, because we want to be able to narrow it down. But maybe there's some overlap that will help.
Yeah, I think that there might be some overlap.
Okay.
And in no particular order, this is based on the order that they were on the spreadsheet. I have Romilda Pereira, Stephen Godfrey, Chanda Smart, Mona Conley Casper, and Deborah Banks.
Okay.
And I've had over the last 6 years lots of different relationships with these individuals through community and through some of my work, and have had the opportunity to get to know each of them in those different respects. And I think that they represent sort of a good spread of representation across our city, both racially, ethnically, and geographically.
Anything else you want to add?
That's it. That's
Okay.
right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very helpful. Thank you. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I'm late coming to the party here.
No problem.
I am still reviewing the list. I'm here to just listen and learn. We have some names, but I really feel that there's some really incredibly appropriate and talented candidates here in the list. So I want to continue to peruse their the resumes and check out a little more and get a better understanding of who all we're talking about. So
that's just fine.
Nothing
that's
bad.
Just fine. And I wanted to also create this space for folks to ask questions. So I know there are a lot of applications and I know folks are busy. So just like I said to Councillor Flynn, feel free to review. And by the end of next week, if you could get us a letter with your names and some, obviously it's helpful if you have additional reasons as to why in the letters too. That would be helpful too, Councillor Braden.
Thank you. And I really appreciate this is an incredible opportunity for us and something we've been advocating and thinking about for so long. So it's an exciting moment, and I appreciate your leadership.
Absolutely, thank you. And I know it's been a long time coming, so I'm really excited with just continuing to move forward. And I'll keep folks posted as we get more letters, of course, as well from folks. Councillor Mejia.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I know we're all trying to get to the finish line here, but I just would like to offer that also I'm open to advocating on behalf of Chandra Smart. So we'll co-sign Councillor Sabi George, if that helps us kind of dwindle things down, as well as would be willing to champion Maria's nomination, as Councilor Arroyo stated, if it helps us move the work, or just because I'm trying to just think about what's going to get us to the 9.
Okay.
That makes the most sense. But I will say, while I have the floor, that I will be striking out Carrie Mays. And so I am going to go really hard for her. So everybody must put on notice that I really want her to be on the review board. I just feel like this is such an amazing opportunity for us to really look at how we cultivate the next generation of youth leaders and creating space for young people who have been involved in community. She's maybe 8 years into this work as a young person. And so I just think it's a natural progression for her leadership. So I'm thinking about the long game here as well, is like, how do we create space for the Civilian Review Board for young people to develop their leadership skills, to be active participants, helping to inform the work. And I, again, have to just take the stage and fight one more time.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate your leadership, Councilor Mejia, on just the youth seat and the youth voice in this whole process, which I think carries significant weight too in the whole process. So thank you very much. And just going back and forth with central staff and my team, if folks could get their letters in by Friday at 10, and we'll follow up with counselors who haven't with this information Friday at 10 a.m. That would be helpful, because we need time to narrow down the list, to review final details, and make sure that we have an adequate committee report to bring back to the council so that everyone is made aware of how we're going to proceed. So this is very helpful. And I think with some of the overlap, that will help us a great deal. Any other questions? This doesn't have to be dragged on. I know how busy folks are. But any other questions from the counselors?
I do have a quick question.
Yep.
Campbell, just in terms of process, I know we're trying to get this through before the legislative cycle ends. In regards to the youth seat, it's for 18 to 21, and I'm just curious about current appointments that have already been put forth, and in terms of aging out. Can you just kind of talk to me about what that process looks like? And I know that, Mayor Wu will, what does it look like for can you just kind of talk to me about the people who have been appointed, what the next steps are, if how many young people, because in my humble opinion, one is not enough. And so I just want to make sure that just because there was already one young person appointed by Mayor Janey, I just want to get some clarity around that youth slots. I just don't think one voice is enough. So just give me some.
No,
insight.
understood. So first, Councilor O'Malley and I have to go back to the new administration, just respect to appointments that were made and whether or not they're going to proceed with those. I have no idea as of right now what the position is of Mayor Wu just yet. What I want to do is to make sure that we get 9 to her in an adequate time for her to review. And what we will do is, I also recognize that people are making different recommendations based on folks within their district, right? I want to be a little bit more objective too and take a step back and really listen to the councilors and your recommendations, and to see if, I looked at, there were about 19 or 20 folks that really rose to the top to see if there's some overlap. We also want to make sure that there is diversity in the demographic, there's diversity in the professional background, there's diversity in the neighborhood, just a few different things. And so I'm not sure what Mayor Wu is going to do with respect to her appointments. And then of course, with respect to these 9, it's obviously her final decision. Sorry, I have like different updates popping up on my screen. It's obviously her decision. So I just want to make sure that we submit a very diverse slate of folks for her to choose from. And I will keep folks abreast of what we learn from the administration as we learn more from them as to what they are thinking with respect to their side and the appointments that are solely within their authority and power.
Right, I know. Thank you for that, Councilor Campbell. But if you could just help me understand the youth.
I have to go back because right now I don't know the age of the existing appointees from the administrative side, and if those appointments are going to remain. I assume they are, but I have no idea. So it can definitely circle back on that.
Right. So I
can follow up and get you information.
Yeah, just because I want to make sure that when we were advocating for youth representation, I don't think that one young person is, I just want to get.
I understand. I mean, but at a minimum, obviously we'll follow the statute to make sure there is one young person, but other young people, even if they're a little bit older than 20s and maybe in their early 30s, but other younger folk do had strong applications too. I'm not sure what the ages are though of the appointments on the mayor's side. So we'll figure that out to see how we add to it. And I also want to be mindful of just the names that I got from other counselors and where there's some overlap with folks too, to ensure that I'm also listening to all of you and feeling as if the slate of people we put forward really does come from all of you.
Okay, all right. I know because the legislation says at least one, it doesn't necessarily mean one. So at least one is just.
That's right. At a minimum, we'll do at least one, but obviously we can do more than that, like you've suggested. I just want to be making sure that they're in the choices and selections of other council colleagues. Just trying to find that balance, right? Frankly. And I want to make sure that the 9 truly do represent the demographics, right? Of different neighborhoods, different ages, every demographic you can think of. The good thing is by the narrowing down already, we actually have some of that. And there may be more than one person that is within that youth bracket, possibly based on other names that I might get. So I'll stay in touch with you guys, particularly as you learn from the mayor's office what they're thinking with their appointments that fall under their sole authority and Mayor Wu's sole authority.
Thank you.
Councilor Arroyo, I saw you too. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Yeah, my one question is when we're doing all these appointments, I know some of these appointments were already made. by the mayor. And I don't have the ordinance directly in front of me, but are all of these appointments as they go on essentially expiring at the exact same time? Are we going to be renewing these all at the same time when they all expire eventually?
I don't think so.
It's structured on different timelines.
Yeah, they're staggered. And Michelle, you could remind me of that, but I think it will be different times going forward.
That's correct. The initial appointments are to have staggered terms of 1, 2, and 3 years. Although, since all of the appointments are ultimately mayoral, it would be up to them, I would assume, which appointments are for which terms initially.
No, that's right. But I will say, Councilor Royal and Michelle, to that point, we can definitely add and say, you know, we think this person should get this term. They can say, you know, thank you for that recommendation, obviously. But I think we can add that, and particularly if you think about the youth seat or something else where we would want a longer term for that particular position. So we can definitely think about doing that too. And the mayor can decide whether or not to accept the recommendation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about in terms of
Awesome.
who's determining the staggering of those terms, in terms of we give a bunch of names and they say, well, that was a year, that was 2, that was 3. Like, so that would be an interesting wrinkle, I think.
And I can, based on what the names ultimately are, look at the various qualifications and also what's represented in the other appointments, right? There are some folks that come with a legal background. There are some folks that come with specific backgrounds that may not be present at all on the Civilian Review Board. And so we want them to be in the pool. So we have the most demographic, the most diverse demographic, including professionally, on the board.
And I believe you already said, for folks listening, that the law enforcement aspect of this, that's not the purpose of these names.
That's right.
That's already happened. Yep. Thank you.
That's right. And I will say, obviously, we got more than 80 applications, but only 81 were eligible. Some were duplicative. Some didn't live in the city of Boston. So we did some initial vetting already based on just share exclusion because they didn't qualify under the statute requirements.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Royal. Anyone else? And then we will wrap up. So I will keep folks posted as I connect with Councilor O'Malley, who unfortunately, like I said, was sick. We will absolutely, of course, keep the public aware of everything. We'll touch base with Mayor Wu and Mayor Wu's office on their appointments to the Civilian Review Board and what their plan is for those appointments that fall under her sole authority. There were previous appointments made, if they're going to keep those or what they're going to do, with the hopes that we get a board that is truly diverse in demographics across every demographic you can think of. Councilman Mejia.
Yes, I have another question in regard to Mayor Wu's appointments. Is it possible from the pool, because I think she still has some appointments that are still up for grabs. Just curious as to whether or not some of the folks that we have put forth from the council side, if push came to shove, which most likely that's how everything works in politics, will we be able to, maybe she could consider some of the people that we're proposing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So the plan is we'll submit the 9. She has the authority to pick 3. We, of course, will recommend that those candidates almost be on a waiting list, right? There's some folks who might ultimately not want to accept the appointment or some things change. And like you said, there will be other positions that she could fill. We will say that these 9 went through this council and that we would hope that she would give them consideration for other slots and spots. And then also make aware of other names that maybe didn't make it into the 9, but where there was several colleagues, for example, that thought that person would be a good candidate. So we can still submit even sort of have that ongoing file outside of even the 9 for her administration to always have as potential solid candidates to serve on the board.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so, right, I'm also just trying to think of process, right? And we have our own and the mayor has her own. And so it would be great at some point to have a better understanding of kind of like what the mayor is looking for and kind of like what her decision-making process looks like. I just think that in terms of just, I think this is such a big deal And it's important for us, in the true spirit of collaboration is for us to really have a thorough understanding of the final decision, what went into it, so that we feel like we have been heard, that we have been engaged, and that there has been every effort made to do this in the spirit of what this legislation was filed under.
Absolutely. And when we submit the final committee report and the letter to the administration with the 9, I would also ask, and Councilor O'Malley, I'm sure would agree with this, that there be an explanation made as to why those 3 out of the 9 were appointed. What was the criteria? What was the rationale? What was the reasoning? And for every counselor to be made aware of that, and the council as a whole as well. So we can explain to folks who came through our process why they were selected or why they were not. And so, yes, we'll push for that. I think I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it's essential as well.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I will be looking forward to that, because I'm going to have to answer back to my people, and I'm going to need to know the why.
Absolutely. And we want to make sure, of course, I know there's some folks who are watching. All those folks, over 80 people submitted an application. Want to thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules to put their name into their willingness to serve the city, particularly in this way, in this capacity. It's historic. It's a wonderful thing. So thank you again to all of the applicants. We will keep folks posted through this process as we make it to the final stages. And we'll ask that, including in the committee report, why certain selections were made. We will speak to those. And then also ask that the mayor, when she is appointing her 3 out of the 9, that she offer up some rationale and reasoning and what her thought process, her team's thought process is as to why they have appointed the 3 they ultimately will appoint out of the 9. So thank you all. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Thank you to all the councilors for joining us. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Michelle, for all of your hard work on this. Thank you, Ellie. And thank you to Councilor O'Malley and his team too. It took a lot to set up the portal, to get everything set up, to make it really a seamless process. So I also want to thank, of course, central staff and Councilor O'Malley's team as well, and my own team. So thank you, everyone. And this working session is adjourned. Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Michelle.
No problem. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Bye, guys.